David Bowie is one of my favorite musical artists of all time, if not my favorite musical artist of all time. And I wanted to do this video today because he has such a long, intense career with 26 studio albums total, many different live albums, and various other albums outside of just his solo work. And anybody that's never listened to his music before might find it kind of daunting to dive into his discography. So I wanted to kind of think of 6 albums that would help you get a feel for David Bowie and all his experimentation over his career. And yeah, he did so many different genres and different musical styles over the years, and thought I would go over some of them here. And I'm going to start with one of his earliest albums, which is Hunky Dory. This has hits such as Changes on it, Life on Mars. It has some weirder cuts such as Andy Warhol and Kooks. So this just kind of shows his his early sound of more just like the 70s rock and roll that he was going for, but he was definitely had some different weird sounds that were coming out of the 60s and with this album as well. And I think it's a good starting point for getting into him as well. And then the next one I wanted to go over came out just the year after this one, which is Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. This was his first character, I guess you could say, he went by. And this is a great concept album about space travel, and yeah, it was in the early 70s, right after we had just first been to the moon and everything like that, and he had done Space Oddity before that. And but yeah, it was just a great concept album that he just really brings that 70s glam rock style that he helped popularize around that time and was in with that scene a lot. Yeah, it's a classic album by him. It's very, very good. It just is what a lot of people look at as when you think of David Bowie, which was this character, and just what was going along with it. Just like he was the weirdo out there, kind of just doing all the face paint and all of the crazy clothing, and just the stage persona that he had was really interesting and cool. So he was just out there and weird and experimenting at the time, so that just shows what he would do in the future. And so I wanted to skip a few years here, that mid part where he was kind of experimenting some with R&B style and soul music and stuff like that. Slightly, it's still obviously the rock and roll style that he had. But I want to start with this next album, which is Low. This was the first of the Berlin trilogy, and this album just really shows him really start to experiment. He met Brian Eno, and they kind of influenced him to start experimenting more with like electronics and ambient sounds. It took me a while to get into this album back in the day, and when it really clicked for me is really when David Bowie clicked for me in general. He was in Berlin at this time with Iggy Pop, and they were both trying to battle their drug addictions. And yeah, this Low is just the first part of the album is just kind of just like this still kind of like glam poppy sound to it, but it's a little different. It sounds a bit darker in a way, somewhat. There's a song like Sound and Vision is a pretty popular song that came off of this album, but nothing else really with hits, and I don't really consider that song much of a hit to begin with. But yeah, and then just so it has those pretty quick songs, short songs, like some even less than 2 minutes long, and then you go to the second side, and it's just 4 decently sized, like 5 to 6 minute ambient tracks, and I just really got entranced by them after a few listens, and just really kind of spaced out to them. And it was really what got me into more ambient and just instrumental music in the first place. So that was a big turning point in his career. And now the next album I want to talk about is his 1980 album, Scary Monsters and Super Creeps. This is him getting more into his pop sound, but still very weirdo pop sound. This is like my favorite of all the 80s albums. I didn't really like much of his 80s stuff, it's just way too poppy, and he says he didn't even really like his 80s albums as much either. He's just too poppy and not as experimental as he was going for before. This album is really just fun, and I love his character during this time as well. Very interesting. Yeah, it's a fun, still kind of experimental pop in a way album. Next I'm going to the 90s here with Buddha of Suburbia. Some people look at this as a soundtrack album, but he only really made the first song as a soundtrack album, and he just kept going with it and made it into a full, just regular studio album. And I like slept on it for a while. I didn't really, I thought it was just a studio or a soundtrack album, but it's very, very beautiful and great album. Definitely a lot of interesting sounds in this. There's like 2 songs back to back. I can't think of the names right off the top of my head. I should have written them down, but that just really I just love those songs. And yeah, just the whole sound of this album is just very good and interesting. And he definitely has some of that R&B sound that he held on to a lot. He liked that sound. And yeah, but now the last album I have on the list here is the album Earthling, which came out in the late 90s, 97. And yeah, this is him. You can tell he was in with Trent Reznor at this time with 9 Inch Nails, because this has a lot of industrial metal influence. So that was really cool and interesting, and I really like this album. It's pretty underrated, I'd say. He did a pretty good job with it, and I definitely go back to this album, listen to it quite often. So it's pretty cool that he did that, and it just shows just like the vast genres that he really touched base on and was open to experimenting with. I think that's why I love David Bowie so much. Just he was just so open to so many different types of music, and he just experimented and did well. He just always made such great music, and he's greatly missed. He wish he would have lived longer, but yeah, I hope this video gave you a little gist of David Bowie and what he has to offer, and kind of hopefully this will give you a good starting point for getting into him. And if you have any questions, ask me down below, and let me know what you think about these albums if you listen to them. And if you have anything else to say about David Bowie, I'd love to talk about it too. So yeah, thanks for watching, and see you guys next time.